Green flag flies, we're racing. The Acura gets a great start from behind. 3 wide up the inside. Closing in on him here through turn number 2. Big slide on corner entry.
Here's, that's a big aggressive dive up the inside there from the Lamborghini. Some bragging rights here, I think, between the two. Look at that slide up ahead from Simpson. That thing was totally sideways, but he was able to catch it.
Race lead. Fantastic stuff here in the F Cup. Big chop by the 777 car off the nose of that. You saw the corner, didn't have overlap, it went right to the apex. Checkered flag, and Adam Youngblood will win the AM race in the CrowdStrike Cup Virtual Racing League and pick up a checkered flag, a wet one here at the Huntsville Range. Jimmy Morgan.
Soldiers, sailors, airmen and women enlist in the armed forces for many reasons, including a sense of duty, patriotism, the adventure, travel, and adrenaline. When service members are injured or wounded and can no longer perform their military duties, they quickly find themselves removed from their team, no longer serving the purpose for which they trained.
I came back from Afghanistan in 2013, and it was kind of a trial and error of finding out, after the military, what's next in life.
Motorsports offers an opportunity to regain that sense of identity within a safe, fast-paced team environment, providing a renewed sense of purpose. Like in the military, in motorsports the goal is in accomplishing the mission, winning as a team, collectively celebrating the successes and supporting teammates through the losses. Operation Motorsport also offers virtual engagements and recovery opportunities through an iRacing league, engaging beneficiaries in a safe, competitive environment from the comfort and safety of their home. Operation Motorsport believes in the power of team, identity, and purpose.
Auto racing has a rich history across the globe, from the beginnings of motor racing at places like Indianapolis and Le Mans to the modern-day formula racing at places like Circuit of the Americas. In the Netherlands, one of the classic circuits is Zandvoort, a 4.3-kilometer FIA Grade 1 circuit. Playing host to the 2021 Dutch Grand Prix, this track has been reconfigured in the real world. But in Assetto Corsa Competizione, the CrowdStrike Cup Virtual Racing League will take on the previous Grand Prix layout for round 2 of the season. My name is Kyle Heyer, joined by Ryan Marine and Kevin Bohm tonight for the second round of the 2021 CrowdStrike Cup Virtual Racing League. Ryan, welcome back. Our first round at Misano a couple months ago back in Italy was a great start to a 6-round season. Tonight, though, round 2 from Zandvoort.
Excited for it, Kyle. Great to be back, first of all, and great to see so many competitors back with us as well. It is a neat track. It's kind of like Misano in some respects, tight and twisty. Not a lot of obvious places to make overtakes happen, but it can be done. And a nice environment as well. We got the twilight here. Temperatures are down quite a bit. That's going to be a talking point throughout the course of the broadcast as qualifying is underway for the pro race, the first of 2 races on the docket tonight.
We've got 2 races, the pro race and the AM race. The pro for the slightly more competitive folks from the CrowdStrike, AWS, Operation Motorsport, and SRO series. They're all kind of coming together to race amongst themselves and against each other in a 6-round season. And of course, the 40-minute race is the pro race. That's the one we're about to begin. We're qualifying for now. We'll have a slightly shorter AM race a little bit later in the night for those that are a little bit less serious, but still out here for a good time. We're also joined by Kevin Bohm, driver of the number 9 Honda Civic Type R TC car in TC America. Kevin, welcome back, and glad to see you here joining us this evening for some really solid racing, and we're going to have you for race number 1 here tonight, so welcome aboard. And to Zandvoort, we were just chatting before, not a track that a lot of us are familiar with. You said you took 5 laps and said, uh-oh.
Yeah, that's right. This track is something else. I mean, it's like Kyle, Ryan said a little bit earlier. It's a lot like Misano in that it's tight and twisty, but it's also different in that there's a lot of elevation change and blind turns, and that's really going to play a key in who really memorizes this track the best.
Yeah, you mentioned the tightness and narrowness of this place, and Ryan, we're riding on board with Roman Alexinkov right now. out front on provisional pole right now by about a 10.5 over Josh Staffen. Very narrow, very fast, a real classic circuit in a lot of ways. The curbing is real old school and big in some spots, little in other spots. It's not very consistent. A lot of kinks and bends, flat corners, bank corners, a little bit of everything here, which creates a big challenge to pass. This is not an easy racetrack to create overtaking opportunities, which means this qualifying session right now is very important.
That's a great point. I think qualifying historically at this track has been a really big part of being successful at Zandvoort, especially in the modern era and in GT cars that are a little bit bigger and take up some more space on the racetrack. But it's a cool track. It has a lot of history. Racing in this part of the Netherlands actually goes back to before the Second World War. There was a street circuit in the area. The permanent circuit that eventually became Zandvoort came to be just after the Second World War. It's actually owned by a member of the Dutch royal family. Learned that earlier tonight. And it was designed by Sammy Davis. Not that Sammy Davis, though. Not the musician. He's actually a British racing driver and journalist from the 30s. He was brought in as an expert to lay out the original layout. It's gone through a lot of changes over the years. You mentioned in recent years, ahead of the Dutch Grand Prix, the return of the Dutch Grand Prix, there was a more recent change to the circuit. But the circuit layout that we'll be racing on here tonight is the previous generation, which doesn't have the new high-banked Arie Luijendijk corner that we'll see on the F1 circuit a little bit later on in the year, as well as actually this weekend in the real world with the Fanatec GT World Challenge Europe, powered by AWS. They'll be racing at Zandvoort coming up in just a few days.
And we should take a moment to mention the Fanatec GT World Challenge America Series, which began a couple months ago back in Sonoma. We've had our second and our third rounds, of course, at COTA and VIR, and we've got a couple more rounds coming up later this year as well, including a very exciting weekend at Nashville, which is going to be happening over the summer. But take a moment to mention that because the different teams we have here tonight include the CrowdStrike team. And again, those are the employees and friends of CrowdStrike and CrowdStrike Racing. Of course, CrowdStrike Racing competing in the Fanatec GT World Challenge America powered by AWS, as well as GT America, the new multi-class series with GT3 and GT4, as well as GT2 this year, which has been a remarkably entertaining series to watch on the World Challenge weekend. So got a couple friends and family from CrowdStrike joining us tonight. They've also got the Operation Motorsport crew on a different team, as well as the SRO team sharing some colors. And you'll notice the colors in the ticker correspond to the different teams. Josh Staffen running for Team SRO. I believe it's the gray that is the the AWS, as I understand it. And then the white is which one am I missing? The Operation Motorsport crew, from what I understand. I might have gotten that wrong. We'll make sure that we get that corrected at some point. There's a lot of colors and a lot of teams. We've got people sharing teams and that sort of thing, so a lot to go over. But Kevin, qualifying is over in 8.5 minutes. Josh Staffen is currently at the top in a Acura NSX. And looking down the list of all the different manufacturers, one thing that Ryan and I noted in the first round was the manufacturer diversity is pretty strong. We have a lot of different manufacturers represented here tonight. Acura, Ferrari, Porsche, Mercedes, and McLaren. 5 different manufacturers in the top 5. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's right, and it really shows how equal all these cars are. Even though they have a little bit different characteristics, some are going to be better at the high-speed parts of the track, and others will be really good in the tight sections. And all these cars have little characteristics that make them unique, but overall, once you look at the whole lap, the lap time is really similar for all these cars.
And there's a look at Ian Burleson in the number 721. Of course, CrowdStrike, we win as one. In the real world, CrowdStrike is the official internet and cloud security provider for SRO's Fanatec GT World Challenge America, powered by AWS. Of course, AWS is what powers the technology of SRO, especially behind the broadcast. Some really cool integrations with the AWS Race Vision, which I know, Ryan, you and Cal have gotten to kind of experiment with on the live streams, and those are really cool bits of technology to show cornering speeds, top speeds, braking points. That's some really cool stuff that AWS is doing.
It is. It's great to bring the data that has always been there for the teams themselves. They're monitoring so much with live telemetry, especially up in the GT3 ranks, and to bring some of that to the fans at home. It's been great integrating that, and having a partner like AWS makes all the difference when it comes to analyzing that data in real time, processing it using their cloud solutions to help to gather that data and make sense of it all, and then present it in an easy to understand format for us on the broadcast.
So going along for the rest of the season, we already mentioned this is a 6-round championship. We had our first round on May 12th at Misano, of course, tonight on June 16th. This is our second round. We'll have July 14th at Spa-Francorchamps, August 11th at Brands Hatch, September 22nd at Barcelona, and Paul Ricard to end the season on October 20th. The 6-round competition will offer both a driver championship and a team championship for the ultimate bragging rights. Drivers will represent Team CrowdStrike, Team AWS, Team SRO, or Team Operation Motorsport. Of course, you can sign up at CrowdStrikeRacing.com. Got some great custom liveries. We already just saw Ian Burleson's CrowdStrike livery. That's a great-looking car, new for tonight. And also, keep an eye on who's running the fastest laps, because 3 bonus points awarded for the winner of the fastest lap award presented by CrowdStrike, because every second counts. So right now, every second is counting here in qualifying. Look at this, .030 between Staffen and Alex Sinkov at the top of the order. Very, very tight there, Kevin.
Yeah, that's incredibly tight for this technical course. I mean, that's pretty amazing, and it's going to be a great race to see kind of where these two cars are fast and how they can race together.
Looking down the rest of the order, we've got about 15 drivers entered here tonight. Jackson Rusin making a late entrance in the CrowdStrike, the Team CrowdStrike number 87 Acura NSX GT3, and of course that shows that the CrowdStrike team is the white number boards. That would mean that the AWS, of course, is the gray, and that would leave the SRO and Atmo guys as the red that is left on the screen. Josh Staffen, one of those members at the top of the order right now, and I always like to note how they're grouped together. You see a lot of the red team towards the bottom of the ticker, with Staffen and Mola holding up the fort right now in 1st and 6th, but a whole bunch of AWS team members up there 2nd through 4th, Alex Sinkov, Locke, and Clark.
The team aspect of this, it's a great new innovative outlook to this competition, different than what we saw in the first season, and I think it gives you motivation, even if you're not running for a win necessarily, to continue to race and have extra motivation, extra incentive to try and make that pass for, say, 7th rather than 8th. Maybe that wouldn't make a huge difference normally, but when you're talking about trying to score points for your team over the course of a whole season, that could be the move that makes the difference in the end. So I really like how that's been integrated into the championship here in the second time around.
Certainly keeps things interesting, as does the changing conditions here in qualifying. Have a look at the top right of your screen. You're going to see a very small temperature and basically a weather bug up there in the top right. 14 degrees Celsius in the air and on the racetrack, and as the sun continues to go down, that is going to get cooler, and the longer you go, the faster the car is going to get. We still got drivers on track. Josh Staffen is still out there trying to go quicker, because as the track gets cooler, you're going to go faster. And Kevin, in the real world, it might not be like flipping a light switch, within the span of 5 or 6 minutes, but over the course of a qualifying session or a race, if a big cloud comes over, is that something you can feel? Is that something that matters to you in the driver's seat?
I mean, it definitely plays a big role, and really paying attention to the temperatures really tells you what you need to do with your tire pressures, because as the track kind of cools off, both the air temperature and the track temperature, then you have to really pay attention to your tire pressures to keep them in the optimum window. So if you just keep trying to go faster with the pressures that worked when it was a little bit warmer, then it's not going to necessarily be optimal out there on track.
So we're watching Team Benaviste in the number 75 Ferrari heading down the hill here. We'll mention that Josh Staffen and Pratik Mishra were the drivers that won the fastest lap awards at Misano. So Josh Staffen in the pro race here are going to try to go 2 for 2 as we make our way towards the end of the qualifying session. 3 minutes left on the board. Now seems like a pretty good time to go over our standings for the CrowdStrike Cup. For the pro categories we come into the night, it's Josh Staffen, 9 points out of Ian Burleson, 39-30. Roman Alexinkov is 3rd, Vadim Mola 4th, Chris Locke in 5th. If you have a look at our top 5, they're out of order, but that's essentially all the same exact drivers, Ryan. So we might see a little bit of shuffling in the points, but it seems like the similar players are still at the top of the order.
It does, and what that's going to do then is put the pressure on those drivers to have a good, solid run today, as many points as possible, because a DNF or if something goes wrong and you finish a bit down the order, that'll be costly if your championship rivals are all running up towards the front. And it looks like that's going to be the case based on this qualifying pace. It's remarkable. Top 4 within a half a second of one another, 30 thousandths of a second between first and second. You made note of that how close it was, and even before that lap from Alex Sinkoff, he was within 75 thousandths of a second just before he put up that most recent flyer to get just that little bit closer. But yeah, it is remarkable. Top 5 all within basically 3/4 of a second of one another. It is remarkably close up at the front of this field.
Here's Jeff Corral, the number 720 McLaren 720S. He is currently up 1/10 to the green on his sector times right now as he works through some of the tighter corners here. We'll see if he can improve. Bill Clark is also going green as he comes out of the last corner. If he goes up, well, he's going to need a couple more tenths to actually move up any positions, but across the line, it is his fastest lap, a 1:35.193. Vadim Mola also green. He jumps up a spot to 6th. Arut Behera in the number 25 Monster Energy sponsored Ferrari. He's working his way around the right-hander. He's 2/10 up on his best lap, so he could jump up 2 or 3 spots here if he goes quicker. So these are all positions that will jump you up a row or 2, and given how tight and twisty the first couple sectors of this racetrack are, being up a row or 2 is going to be very, very important to getting some good track position to start this 40-minute race.
Yeah, absolutely crucial to get a good run in qualifying, secure as good of a starting spot as you can. I mean, just looking at these visuals, you can see what we were talking about, how tight this track is, how there's not a ton of long straightaways into tight corners with big braking zones. I suppose turn 1 is probably where the passing gets done here, but even then it's going to take a mistake coming out of that final corner, most likely, to make this run in the slipstream down here to turn 1 and hopefully be able to make that out-braking maneuver. That's about the one place that I can find around this track. What about you, Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking exactly the same thing. This track is tight and twisty, and you're constantly moving from one side of the track to the other just to navigate around the track. So I think the turn 1 is going to be the most popular passing area, but at the same time, as a driver, sometimes you have to get creative, not only to make a pass happen, but also to maybe even throw off the competitor ahead of you. So we might see some creativity out there.
Having a look at the manufacturers, we mentioned these a little bit earlier in the night, but have a look at the Porsches. Here's Hunter Reeve in the number 44 for Operation Motorsport. Take a look at where there's 4 Porsches, 3 of them are 12th or further back. We've talked at length in the past about how the rear engine 911 GT3R has some different driving dynamics, but Ryan, I'm a little bit surprised to see the Porsches that far back. This car is very good pretty much everywhere it goes, and it seems like it's a little bit loaded further back in the field than I would expect here in qualifying.
I'd agree with that, although it is worth noting that Bill Clark is there in 3rd and within nearly, within 3/10 of a second of the pole. So that's the pink pig livery that you're looking at right there. And you would think this would be a good track for the Porsche because of the low-speed corners, the acceleration off with the engine located back over the rear wheels. That tends to favor the Porsche, but you still have to be able to drive it. You still have to be able to extract that speed, and that's what Bill has shown. The car is capable, but maybe the setup isn't quite right for the other Porsches, or whatever the case may be. They're still struggling to find a little bit of that ultimate pace.
So Hunter Reeve pulls on over. He did go quicker, but not quick enough to jump up any spots. And nobody is left on the racetrack. Qualifying is complete here from Circuit Park Zandvoort for the second round of the CrowdStrike Cup Virtual Racing League. In a few minutes, we're going to turn them loose for 40 minutes. And just a reminder of what we've got coming up tonight. The Pro Race is the first of the 2. Then we'll have our Am Race, a slightly more casual experience. But, Ryan, we've seen in the past that the Am Race can be just as exciting as the Pro Race. There's some competitive drivers in there, even though it's supposed to be at least a little bit less competitive. It's still a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, no question. That's what it's been like so far, and I think a lot of it just comes down to how much time you want to spend preparing for this, because if you're new to this, if you're just joining us, just like their real-world counterparts, these virtual GT3 cars, there's a lot of customization you can do. There's a lot you can work on with the setup of these cars, and it definitely translates into how they drive within the sim. So if you're in this pro race, it's probably a sign that you spent some time earlier in the week tweaking on things, going beyond just the baseline setups that are there in Assetto Corsa Competizione. Meanwhile, the AMs, I think they probably want to jump in and just go racing, and that doesn't necessarily mean that there's not any skill level there. I think, to the contrary, we've seen that the skill level can be quite high, but maybe the amount of prep going in isn't quite as far as developed. But nevertheless, the racing's been good in both categories so far. And what I think is going to be interesting is this early morning start time here in the dark. This is not a track, I don't think, that has a whole lot of artificial lighting, so it's all going to be down to the headlights. And look at those temperatures as well. 12 degrees Celsius. I think that's right around 50 degrees Fahrenheit. That's ambient as well as track temperature, so that's going to be a big thing to keep an eye on too.
Certainly, you can have a look there at the time. It's 4 o'clock a.m. here local time in Zandvoort, at least here in Assetto Corsa Competizione. So we'll be driving into the daylight. And Kevin, there are a bunch of races in the racing world that drive into the darkness. Not a ton that start at night and drive into the daytime. I can think of the Bathurst 12-hour as one of the few that does that. This is a little bit backwards from what we're normally used to seeing. Normally the track gets cooler and the track grips up. We're going to go the opposite direction now. Does that create other challenges that racing into the darkness doesn't normally bring up?
Yeah, it does, and I really feel like driving from darkness to light is a lot harder than the other way around, because if it's light outside and it gets dark, it's kind of happening gradually, and your eyes can adjust, and you can kind of reset all your reference points as you're driving around the track. But now these guys are jumping from kind of a daylight qualifying into immediate night driving. So they have to remember all their marks, but they're going to look really different now all of a sudden. So it's going to take some adjusting to kind of optimize the track and not make any mistakes for the first couple of laps until the track lights up.
Yeah, that's a good point. Ryan, adding on to that, with starting in the darkness, not being able to see your braking points is one thing, but also dealing with glare in the mirrors and not being able to kind of see where people are because you just got white spots in the mirror. That's going to be a challenge. Maybe not quite as much here in the sim, but in the real world, that is certainly a challenge. Just getting any visibility at all is going to be hard. But you can see that the sun is already about to peek over before we even begin our pace lap, so it won't be pitch black. It'll just be early morning.
I think this pace lap is going to be crucial. Some intel that we got actually from Josh Staffen, who's starting on pole. He was pointing out that they knew that these were the conditions that were coming. They knew it was going to be dark, and crucially, they knew that it was going to be cold. And I did look this up because I don't speak Celsius very well, but 12 degrees Celsius is 53.6 degrees Fahrenheit. That is remarkably cool as far as ambient temperatures, but also the track temperatures that's going to affect the tires as well. So this formation lap, there's a lot of things you can do, dragging the brake, weaving around a little bit to try and generate some temperature to make sure that the tires are as close to operating temp as possible, because within Assetto Corsa Competizione, the tire model is quite sophisticated, and doing something like running over a curb when the pressures aren't quite up, that can actually damage these virtual tires just like it would happen in real life. And so that's something to keep an eye on. Drivers are going to need to be very careful on the opening couple of laps and use this pace lap if possible to try and build that pressure, build that temperature to make sure that they have a nice clean run here at the start of this race.
Kevin, that's something you have to do as well in the TC car that you drive in TC America, is get those temperatures up and ready to go. Differences, though, in a GT3 car versus the TC car that you drive, or at least let's talk about similarities as well. Traction control, ABS, take us through what your car has that the GT3s might also have that make the car similar. Then what are the differences between them, especially in the electronics area?
Well, I mean, the touring car that I'm driving has ABS and a lot less power and a lot less kind of size tire, which to some extent on the first lap helps you warm everything up. I mean, the small tire takes a little bit less work to get it up to temperature, and you can kind of use the ABS and the brakes to heat the brakes up and use that to warm the tires up. And you'll probably see a lot of these cars even tonight doing that. They'll be either dragging the brakes or accelerating and braking, because the brake temperature is really useful tool to get some heat in the tires. And you'll also see them weaving back and forth. And kind of you can also do some more tricky things, kind of moving your brake bias around and while you're dragging the brake to kind of get the heat not in the front or the rear, depending on where it's heating up. So these cars can have that adjustability, and again, you can kind of turn the traction control and ABS that these cars have either down or off to kind of help heat the tires up as well. So there's a lot of adjustability that these GT3 cars have to help heat things up on these warm-up laps.
On board with Josh Staffen, and I kind of want to watch what he's doing in this car. You can hear the brakes dragging, the squeaking until they get up to temperature. We'll see if he weaves the tires at all, but also keep an eye on the dashboard here. There is a bunch of electronics, and as Kevin mentioned, you can adjust anti-lock brakes, traction control, and some other adjustments here as well. And you'll actually see the driver model reach down and twist those knobs and push those buttons when they make adjustments in the car. And I'm sure we'll see some of that. We'll keep an eye in the cockpits a little bit later today to see if they're doing that. Over the course of the race, Ryan, conditions will change enough that changing any of those settings will probably gain you an advantage if you know what buttons to push.
That's such an important part of modern GT racing, and I think there is this sense that, well, these modern drivers, they have all these different things helping them, the traction control, the anti-lock brakes, and that is true. But on the flip side, I think it's worth noting that they also have so much at their disposal that they have to have mastery of. To win a high-level GT3 race, you have to have total mastery over the systems on these cars, and they are orders of magnitude more complicated than cars of previous eras, just because there is so much adjustability in real time. The electronics are so very complex, and I think that there's an art to that that maybe gets overlooked when you talk about them simply as driver aids. They are aids, no question about it, but you still, as the driver, have to get them dialed in appropriately for them to actually be able to help you, at least in the most effective manner. And there's a real skill and knowledge that's required to be fast in a car like this.
Something, teach a man to fish versus give a man a fish. If you teach a man how to use the traction control, that's a lot better than just giving it to him.
That's right.
So as we work through the chicane here and head up towards the front straightaway, again, 40 minutes for the CrowdStrike Cup Virtual Racing League. You see them bunching up double file here. Nice tight formation, 15 drivers deep, so just about 8 rows of cars. Driver, Rodney Campbell, did not take the grid. He's going to start from the pits. Let's make that 7 rows of cars all the way back to Jackson Rouston in the number 87 Acura. As we come up onto the front straightaway here in a moment, as soon as this race is over, don't go anywhere. We've got our AM race coming up right after, a slightly shorter, a little bit more casual race. But it's the pros going at it tonight. And we're going to start off with round 2 of the CrowdStrike Cup Virtual Racing League here from Zandvoort. Josh Staffen, Roman Alexeinkov. Door-to-door, it's Ferrari versus Acura, 2 mid-engined turbocharged sports cars rolling down the front straightaway. CrowdStrike Cup Virtual Racing League action from Zandvoort for the second time this season. 4 more rounds to go as we head under the gantry here on the front straightaway, waiting for the green flag to fly. There it is, green flag out. We're racing in the CrowdStrike Cup Virtual Racing League here at Zandvoort. There is Chris Locke looking up the outside, almost 3 wide into turn 1, stacking up. Everybody trying to find room to race. 3 wide in the middle of the pack. Burleson sandwiched in. He finds room to race. Jeff Corral backs out. Side by side now with Vadim Mola in the green, black, and blue Aston Martin. There's still door-to-door. 2 British GT cars going door-to-door here, Ryan, as we head to turn 3.
The front 5 or 6 have sorted themselves out single file, but look at this, still side by side. Great racing between these two. Good respect shown between them, and they're not done yet. Look at this, Aston to the inside, McLaren to the outside. I think finally we'll see the McLaren come out on top in that duel, and that might open up the door here. And indeed, the Aston now under attack once again.
Dean putting pressure on the back of Vadim Mola here now. Watch the grass on driver's left. It kind of pops out at you. Big slide for Mola through the right-hander there. You see a stack up behind Bill Clark in the number 92 Pink Pig Porsche. Got a little bit of a train forming behind him as we head towards the 3rd and final sector on this racetrack to complete the first lap. Josh Staffen, though, free and clear from Roman Alexeinkov for 3rd, though, Kevin. It's going to get pretty interesting here, Porsche versus Mercedes.
Yeah, you have to wonder if it's taking a little bit longer to get the Porsche tires up to temperature, or if he's being a little bit more conservative and staying away from the curbs until they get the pressure up, because he clearly had a lot of pace in qualifying, and it looks just a little bit different here at the beginning of the race.
Watching Chris Locke in the Mercedes, that is the Evo variant of the Mercedes-AMG. And Ryan, of course, manufacturers come out with Evo kits for their cars, basically just adjustments to the electronics, maybe some refreshes to the aerodynamics, but largely the same as the previous model, other than those small changes, but a bit of a bigger mouth on this Evo generation AMG and some slightly different headlights. It's a mean-looking car for sure.
That's definitely the most noticeable change, the front fascia on this Mercedes-AMG GT3 Evo versus the original version of the GT3 car. And right there, a little bit of a hit up the rear. Looks like Burleson getting a bit impatient, trying to find a way around lock. But there's also been a lot done in terms of driver comfort and updating the electronics a little bit. The Mercedes, the first generation, was viewed as maybe the most driver-friendly GT3 car for a very long time, and I think they've only taken that one step further with this Evo.
I'm having a look at on board here with Ian Burleson, so low to the ground. One word that just describes having to go fast here: commitment. There's so many corners here. You just have to throw the car into and lean on that downforce. And Kevin, in the GT3 car, you've got plenty of downforce to lean on to go faster on the fast stuff.
Yeah, that's right. And basically, the faster you go, the more you can use it. So you really have to find a way to trust it and try it out there, and also be careful at the same time, because as we go through the chicane right here, it's an example of a really low-speed turn where that downforce is not going to help you. So you have to know when to use it and when to not rely on it at the same time. Large
wings on the backs of these cars, and splitters and diffusers and all sorts of other foreign words to describe the surfaces on the cars that generate downforce and essentially channel the air over or under the car or through it in some instances, Ryan, to make the car stick to the racetrack better. But as you go faster, as Kevin mentioned, it's going to push the car down more. So when you slow down, all that downforce peels off, and sometimes the slower corners are harder than the fast ones.
Yeah, that also affects braking at high speeds. Whoa, there's a big off there from the McLaren. Nice save to be able to bring that back. Let's see if that allows the Ferrari Benavides to make it around the outside. It looks like no is the answer for now. And look at that, already back on the attack is Corral after dropping that spot. He's not too pleased with himself and already trying to find a way back by. But yeah, you're right about that. The slower corners, you don't have the aid of the downforce. You don't have the drag as much as you start to slow down. So your braking, you actually have to apply more braking to slow the same amount the deeper into the braking zone you get as the speed comes down. And that's an adjustment that drivers often talk about when they're coming into a downforce car from a car with less downforce.
Well, great battle happening here from Mola on back in the number 116 Aston Martin, the green and blue car, just up the road from this shot. Josh Staffen drove out to a 1.6 second lead for fourth place. A bit of a battle forming here between Chris Lock and Ian Burleson. Burleson in the CrowdStrike McLaren 720S, and already had some people in the comments mentioning how good of a livery this is. And while, yes, the livery is beautiful on the Mercedes-AMG GT3 Evos, Infinitec GT World Challenge America powered by AWS, it looks good on McLaren too. I'll give them credit.
Yeah, it's a sharp-looking race car.
Down the front straightaway, completing our next lap, and we're about 6 minutes in. Staffen now leads by 1.6, but the battle's still happening behind Benavista and also Matt in the number 19 Bentley. Now this is a big thundering beast that we unfortunately don't see in the American side of SRO competition anymore, but one of the few right-hand drive cars here tonight, and a little bit different in some ways, but remarkably competitive given at least its perceived size and weight.
That's right. I mean, I don't think you look at the Bentley and think this is the same kind of performance vehicle that you do when you look at a Ferrari or a Lamborghini or a Porsche, or pick your GT3 car of choice. But thanks to the SRO's balance of performance, the system that they use to try and equalize these cars, it has proven to be a very potent weapon, not just in the States, but over in Europe as well. Unfortunately, the Bentley factory program has gone away, so it's a bit of a rare thing to see one of these Bentleys racing in a GT3 race these days, but still very present virtually, which is good to see, because not only do they look interesting, they sound fantastic, and certainly love the different diversity that you see in GT3 racing, and having a big thundering Bentley was a huge part of that for so many years.
Bit of a stack up forming behind Jeff Corral, the number 720 McLaren, but Benaviste struggling with that Bentley right on his tail here, Kevin, as we work our way to the middle portion of this race. I'm impressed with how tight things still are. There's usually a point when you start clicking off laps and it's just sort of a formality to get to the end of the race. We have not gotten to that point yet. It's still pretty hot here in the mid-pack.
Yeah, that's right, and I think it really comes down to all the twists and turns that this track has. It really gives a chance if you make a mistake, you can kind of make up for it by waiting for someone else to make a mistake, because this track is very technical, and to get the most out of it, it's really tough. So it's really about kind of trying to minimize your mistakes and maximize anytime someone else gives you something, and I think it's really keeping the cars close right now.
Well, speaking of mistakes, a moment ago when we were chatting about something else, I noticed a white flag off to the side of the racetrack. Now, white flag only means last lap when it's displayed from the starter stand. Anywhere else, it means a slow-moving vehicle. Ian Burleson found his way off track a little while ago, spun the car out, but he's going back straight again. I see a little bit of damage to the rear of that car, so something tells me he had a little bit of help.
Yeah, that probably is the case, but he's back on the comeback trail now. Has picked up a spot here to get past Morgan and up back into 12th, and now he's got 2 seconds to try and make up to get back to Reeve. This is costly, though, from a championship perspective. He was well placed from his team prior to that incident, and if you look, the white number background for Burleson and the CrowdStrike team, next best placed driver, Benaviste, at the moment in 7th. That is not what they want from the team's championship point of view.
And why is that important? Well, Ian Burleson came in second in the standings, chasing this guy right here, Josh Staffen. Here's the problem. Josh Staffen has nobody in front of him. He's leading the race by a pretty significant margin, 1.6 seconds. So Burleson's got a lot of work to do, not only for the team championship, but for the drivers' championship as well. Staffen is not going to make a lot of mistakes this season. So if you have a mistake like Burleson did or an issue like he did, you got to get back up there and pick yourself up and dust yourself off, because you can't have a day like this and finish where he is.
It did look to me like Alex Sinkoff was getting closer over the last couple of laps, because I think Staffen's lead had gotten up around 2 seconds at one point, and they'd come down to under 1.5 seconds, but Staffen has responded, putting together some nice sectors here as of late, and has built that margin back to 1.6 seconds over Alex Sinkoff in the Ferrari that we're riding on board with. That's the gap right there, first to second. You can see the leader out the windshield. At the moment, not a whole lot between the two, but I do wonder if we do get some lap traffic before this race is all said and done. That might be the opportunity to make a pass. We talked about how difficult it is to pass around this track, but when you start factoring slower cars into the equation, all of a sudden opportunities might open up. So that's a thing to keep an eye on.
Well, for those with a keen memory, Roman Alexinkov actually crossed the line at Misano in second place, but he actually was served a 1 place penalty because of a dive bomb incident deemed avoidable contact. So he was moved back to third back at Misano, and therefore is third in the standings tonight. He is very, very fast, but he has proved to be a little bit over-aggressive, perhaps, at least back at Misano. The aggression, Kevin, can sometimes pay off. It can also hurt you sometimes. So there's a control to aggression to be had that can get you places, and sometimes aggression can get you put in the penalty box.
That's right. I mean, in the end, aggression only really works when you can still avoid the contact, so that's always the main goal. And especially with a track like this with very few straightaways, lap traffic's going to play a bigger impact. It's going to have a bigger impact than it would at a track with more straightaways, just because there's not an easy way to gain a little momentum and just drive past a slower car. So it's going to be a real balance of finding a way, if lap traffic comes into play, to get by without kind of compromising your lap too much, without also making that contact that kind of ruins multiple people's races.
Great battle happening behind Jeff Corral again, all for 6th place, but look back here for 9th. That is Arut Behera and Chris Walsh. Walsh is in the number 104 Porsche, Behera in the number 25 Ferrari 488, a twin turbocharged V8 power plant sitting behind the driver here. As we enter the sweeping left-hander, 5-car battle for 6th spot, and the patience is still here for now, but at some point, Ryan, it's going to run out. We're not anywhere near halfway just yet. There's still about 9 minutes to go to get there. So I'm not sure that there's a lot of pressure yet, but you can see Walsh overdriving a little bit. That's going to open up opportunity here for Behera.
Yeah, that's what he's looking for. When there's not an obvious passing zone, sometimes your best bet is just to lie in wait, try and force an error, be positioned to take advantage of that mistake. Although, as Kevin talked about, this is not necessarily a track that it's even easy to make take advantage of another driver's mistake. You can kind of cover for yourself at various points on this track. But right there, you see a move to the inside from the Bentley side by side, and Gefeller able to get past Benavides and behind. A nice pass there into turn 1, or Tarzan Bend as it's called here at Zandvoort. So it can be done. We just saw it, 2 instances of it. Oh, and a bit of contact there that sends Benavides wide.
The Ferrari's going to go and lose 3 spots all at once, and didn't look like Bahera was actually able to complete that pass on Chris Walsh. He went in there deep, got alongside, completed it for a moment, but got repassed again. Kind of an over-under there, which is actually sort of challenging to do with the banking that's there. And Kevin, not a lot of racetracks with the banking that we see here at Zandvoort as we see Bahera go by Walsh. But banking is really unique because it sort of takes away some lines that you have the opportunity to run. A flat corner gives you a lot of different ways to get through it. A banked corner, there's really one good line. It's tricky to get an over-under done there because if you get out of the groove, you kind of slide up off the racetrack.
Yeah, you got to really be careful, and hopefully if the line is maybe 1.5 lanes wide, you can maybe make it work sometimes if you don't have to deviate very far from the ideal line. But as we see some contact here, it's definitely tough to navigate these really tight turns without that contact sometimes.
Here's another look at it here in just a moment. Dean Benavides getting some contact from Arup Bahera, and here's another look. Goes up the inside, gets up on the curb, and to me, that's a tough call. I mean, it looked like Benavides was already up on the curbing trying to stay out of the corner, but just ran out of racetrack. So I'm sure they'll have maybe a slight disagreement about that, but hopefully sort it out as we make our way towards the halfway point of this race. Out front, Josh Staffen continues the lead over Roman Aleksenkov. Bill Clark running in 3rd, maybe the dark horse here in this championship. Comes into the night down the order in 8th. Did not have an amazing run back at Misano. He finished 8th there. But if he finishes where he is, he will likely gain a whole bunch of spots in the points championship. Being that this is the first couple rounds of the season here, Ryan, if you have a really good day, it's going to help you a lot in the championship.
Yeah, this is a nice solid result. If you can consistently run in podium contention, I think that really positions you nicely for a bid at the Drivers' Championship, and it helps for the Teams' Championship as well. And he's withstood a lot of pressure in this race. We haven't really been watching it necessarily, but if you've been keeping an eye on the scoring pylon on the left that shows the gaps, for most of this race, Clark had Locke and Mola and others close behind, within just a couple of seconds or less of him, and he's slowly been able to build a bit of a margin, build a cushion, not under as much pressure now, and Locke has settled into a pace that isn't quite on par with what Clark has been able to put together over the last few laps. I thought Locke was the impressive driver early, nearly made a nice move around the outside right here in this corner at the start. Couldn't make that work, but has settled in, tried to put the pressure on Clark to make a pass, but that didn't turn out to be a possibility. So maybe this is that part of the race now, Kyle, that you talked about, where you just settle in, you start to log some laps, and you position yourself for that final sprint to the finish.
Well, I think the drivers up here in the top 5 got that memo from Jeff Corral on back. I don't think they did. They're still battling hard back here. Matt Gefeller and the number 19 Bentley still hot on the heels of the white McLaren. And behind them, behind Chris Walsh, still a battle. Arup Bahera just got around him. And here comes Ian Burleson on a charge after his spin a little earlier in the race. Sparks flying, but Burleson is on a mission.
This is where it's difficult to be patient yet aggressive. You know you have to be aggressive on a track like this and get the moves done when the opportunity opens up, but you don't want to force the issue and compound what has already been a difficult day. Able to salvage a couple of positions here over the last few laps, but right now just trying to plot away by Walsh. And this Porsche right up ahead, and yikes, that was a scary moment. And I'm not sure he got away with it. That was some pretty hard wall contact.
Yeah, and I think he just got spooked by the Porsche jumping on the brakes. Let's have another look at it here in a moment. He was following the Porsche and just got spooked. I think the Porsche braked a little bit earlier than he was expecting. Slammed on the binders and was not able to get the car turned, which is interesting, Kevin. Usually that ABS will allow you to turn the car at least a little bit versus just locking up the brakes. I almost wonder if Burleson had not a ton of ABS in this car to try to find some advantage, but could have had a lockup and slid off track and just couldn't get the car rotated, hit that Armco, and now will very likely have some significant damage.
Yeah, that's possible. It looked to me a little bit like he was close enough to the Porsche that he just missed his brake zone and was a little bit late to the brakes. And obviously, he was trying to avoid the contact with the Porsche if that was a mistake, and didn't want to involve the Porsche in the mistake, and decided to go off track to avoid it. So that's what it looked like to me, but definitely possible that it was related to kind of some of the ABS setting as well. But definitely the contact with the wall. I mean, these cars will take damage whenever you make contact with something, so it's unlikely the car will feel like it did at the beginning of the race anymore.
Kevin, I'm wondering if this is almost a classic case of target fixation. And for those that don't understand or have not heard this term used before, can you explain what target fixation is? Because thinking about it now, I think that might have been what caught out Ian Burleson there.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those times where you try so hard not to hit something that you end up hitting it because you're focused on it. So I think he was trying to size up a potential pass, and in doing so maybe missed the normal brake marker that he was looking at, or maybe he even couldn't see it because the car ahead of him was so close, and that's sort of what caused that. But fortunately, it didn't make car-to-car contact.
Ryan, this seems like it happens in almost every form of motorsport, whether it's simulated, whether it's real at any level. Drivers will be following a competitor and essentially be watching their taillights, but you really want to look where you want the car to go. The problem is if you're watching the taillights, by the time you hit the brakes after you see theirs light up, it's too late. So one of those moments where you have to kind of look past the car that's right in front of you.
Yeah, what I was always taught was that the car will follow your eyes, and you really do want to be looking up ahead as much as possible, looking through the corner. And oftentimes if you get an onboard shot of a driver in real life, you'll see that helmet swivel left or right, and you can kind of see, yeah, they're approaching this corner here, but they're already looking at the next corner there. That's such a huge part of it. So yeah, not fixating on the car right in front of you, certainly paying attention so you don't run into the back of whoever you're chasing, but keeping those eyes up, that's a crucial component of being fast running in traffic.
Love this helmet cam here on Matt Gefeller as we ride in the Bentley Continental GT3. Unique angle here, again sitting on the right side of the car. You can watch his head turning to follow the road. Also note on the left-hand side, there is a rear view mirror up at the top left of your screen. There's also a rear view camera. Now, Kevin, that's a very common thing now in race cars these days where rear visibility isn't amazing, so they'll add a secondary camera system. I know in some high-level multi-class series, they'll also have basically vehicle or class recognition. It will actually tell you. I know the Corvette C7R had a system like this. It will tell you what is in your mirror and put basically a blue or orange or red dot on it so that you can follow it through and into your vision, which I think is really, really neat.
Yeah, that's right. And the kind of rear view camera really came into existence a lot of the mid-engine cars, because the kind of rear engine cover in a lot of ways made it really hard to see behind you. And especially with multi-class racing, it's really important to be able to look behind you and know whether it's a faster class car or maybe a slower class car that you don't need to worry about. And that's where some of the radar systems, it's really using a lot of the same technology that you see in road cars today that help with your adaptive cruise control and your blind spot monitoring. And it's using that technology to detect cars behind you and really show where they're going and even detect what they are based on their shape.
It's really interesting that you bring that up. We got a chance to talk to a couple folks from Mercedes back during our Sonoma live stream for CrowdStrike Racing, and really interesting talking about the massive amount of differences between a Mercedes AMG road car versus the race car. Of course, essentially purpose built, but the technologies, as you mentioned, Kevin, a lot shared, a lot learned from the racing world that is taken to the road and vice versa. So manufacturers will obviously utilize anything that they learn in the racing environment, take it back to the road, and make your road car safer that you can buy from a Mercedes or a Honda dealership, which I find absolutely fascinating. And things that you learn from developing road cars that, of course, you would take to the racetrack as well. And a perfect example of going right from the dealership to the racetrack is, of course, the TCA category in TC America, the championship that you won last year, Kevin. Those cars, not a whole lot different than what rolls off the factory line.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the touring car, the TCA class Honda Civic Si that I raced last year is probably a good 95% stock car. I mean, it's mostly the engine and powertrain and chassis is completely stock, and there's a roll cage added for safety, and really the suspension and brakes are really only upgraded to kind of cope with the really grippy Pirelli tires that we run in the TC America Series, and it really makes it familiar to what you would drive on the road car. It has a similar amount of power, and it's pretty easy to drive from that perspective.
Ooh, a little bit of bumper cars down there between the Porsches. Burleson gets tagged and will loop it. Chris Walsh, Hunter Reeve get together, and Ian Burleson gets the worst end of that, I think, as Dean Benavides drives on by. So Burleson, for the third time tonight, Ryan, has had some trouble and drops now down to what will be 12th position. So both of his climbs forward have been abruptly ended with some contact.
Kevin, have you ever had a race where no matter what you do, you just seem to be in the wrong place at the wrong time? Because that's what it looks like it's been like for Burleson tonight.
Yeah, I've been there before, where you feel like you're finally making some progress, and then something happens and you lose everything that you did, and you just have to start from scratch again. And it looks like Burleson just has to. It's kind of a Groundhog's Day for him as he starts from the back and builds his way forward all these times.
Also taking note of the sun now peaking above the horizon. That is a unique challenge as well, especially here in Assetto Corsa Competizione versus some other simulators. Simulates that glare very, very well, especially if you're in virtual reality, which some drivers are. The visibility is sometimes not great when you're looking at that sun, and we'll ride on board here with Burleson as he follows Dean Benavides. Best battle on the racetrack at the moment. When we turn into the sunlight, you're going to see how blinding this can be, and that's a real big distraction for drivers in the real world and in the sim.
I'll have to think about that. Like, at what level of realism do you want in, when you're doing something for your entertainment? Because on one hand, you want to have the most realistic sim to get into the mindset of a race car driver that you possibly can, but when it's actually a little bit uncomfortable, and that's what the glare can be, I do wonder if that might even be taking it a bit too far, but it definitely does go a long way towards making it a realistic experience and helping you understand what it is that a high-level GT3 driver experiences over the course of a race.
Well, let me tell you, sim racers, for a lot of them, there's no such thing as too far. They will go to every limit that they possibly can to make it a realistic experience. There's Burleson's view as we come up over the hill. Sun in the eyes, now a dab on the brakes on the right-hander here. They will go to extreme lengths to make it realistic. Whoa, big moment there for Dean Benavides. Some crews and some drivers will have full-on motion rigs, and I know that CrowdStrike was asking some people to share their rigs. They were sharing CJ Moses's triple screen setup and get that big full range and field of view. And some drivers will just have a monitor on a stack of books on a desk with a Logitech wheel or whatever. But some will go all out and make their experience as realistic as possible. So 15 minutes to go here in the pro race for the CrowdStrike Cup Virtual Racing League round number 2. Josh Staffen out up front. That gap has hovered around 1.5 to 2 seconds, Ryan, but it has not gotten extreme in either direction. Alex Inkov still floating back there, still a threat, but not an imminent one for Staffen.
It seems like Staffen is just managing this gap. He's got a pace that he's comfortable with. He's running it lap after lap. When Alexinkov starts to make some headway, then Staffen has just that little bit extra left in reserve that he can turn on and help to build that gap back to around 2 seconds. It's not gotten much bigger than that at any point. Let's see here, though. Alexinkov has really been able to make some headway over the last lap or two, it seems like, just slowly but surely chipping away at that deficit. And I know Staffen was definitely aware of the colder temperatures because he sent us a message about it, talking through some of the keys to the race today. And it seemed like he was very aggressive off the bat, which leads me to believe that he did some practicing in cold temperatures, and he used that to his advantage to build a bit of an advantage that he's been nursing ever since. But maybe he went too far with the tire pressures, and as the track temp is starting to come up a little bit, maybe that's going away from the setup that he started with, or perhaps just the tire wear as simulated in this ACC is starting to be an issue for him, because slowly but surely Alexinkov is getting closer, and it seems like that's only accelerating the deeper we get into this race.
I just have to wonder if even if Alexinkov passes Josh Staffen and wins this race, if that is going to be futile in comparison, just because Josh Staffen right now is 2/10 quicker, or at least had a lap that was 2/10 quicker than everybody else. So he would be awarded the CrowdStrike fastest lap and get those 3 extra bonus points, which doesn't quite negate the advantage from winning that Alex Sinkov would get. But if Staffen stays out front, he's going to get 9 more points than the second place driver again, like he did last time out. So Alex Sinkov, I think, has to pass Staffen if he wants any chance of running him down in the points.
Yeah, if that's his goal here this weekend, to try and overhaul Staffen, that's what he's going to have to do. It's a great point about Staffen already with those points in the bag, and I don't think anyone's going to take them from him because we're starting to see temperatures come up, although I don't know if that's the bigger issue. I think primarily the fact is that the tire wear might be a problem. Now, the wild card in that could be if somebody has an issue, has to come into the pits, and they get a new set of tires, then maybe they have the weapon that they need to go out and set a new fastest lap. But barring something like that, I don't think any of the front runners are going to be able to muster the pace on used Pirellis to match what Staffen did. So that's essentially 3 points in the bag, barring something unforeseen here towards the end. But all that said, I think Staffen's here to win this race, and Alex Sinkov is as well. He's going to try and find a way, and that, look, we've got some lap traffic up ahead. That's going to be worth keeping an eye on. And then how is Alex Sinkov going to handle this situation? Because as you chronicled, there was a penalty for avoidable contact in the last race, and I wonder if that's in the back of his mind just that little bit in terms of how he's going to approach any potential confrontation with Staffen for the lead.
I'm sure that is on his mind as you see one of the cars pull over. I think that's Jackson Rusin in the number 87. And Kevin, I want your perspective on this. Alex Sinkov is now within a second of Josh Staffen. Do you like having a rabbit to chase out front, something that's concrete that you can see out the windshield that gets bigger to know you're going faster? Or do you like to be the one out front controlling the race from the track position standpoint and only have to look in your mirror every once in a while to make sure that you're going as fast as you need to be?
Well, I mean, I think I prefer, especially with 11 minutes to go, to be the car out front because all you have to do is stay there. But in the end, even if you're the car behind, having the car out front and being able to watch what they're doing and maybe even be able to really size up where they're good or maybe even struggling, then it helps you make a strategy to get by. So I'm pretty much okay either way, but definitely it looks like Staffen might be struggling with the tire grip just a little bit now. Yeah,
0.3 better for Alex Sinkov last time by, and Ryan, for us, I think that spells that there's blood in the water for Alex Sinkov to sniff and go up there and run Staffen down. But we mentioned that the issue that he had back at Misano, I think that will have been a learning experience, that there are people watching, and you got to do it clean. You got to get by the driver in front cleanly if you want to hold on to those positions. And I think that's even dangerous for Staffen to have Alex Sinkov have already learned that lesson early in the season and still be just as fast. So the next 10 minutes and 30 seconds are going to be very, very interesting.
Yeah, for sure. I'm curious. Oh, big moment there for Alex Sinkov just as he was getting closer. That's going to cost him a ton of time. It just looked like car broke traction a little bit at the rear. It had a big wiggle as we saw from that onboard shot, and slow to get back up to speed, it would appear.
Well, we did say the next 10 minutes and 30 seconds would be interesting, and right out of the gate, he proved that it would be. Let's have a look. 2.8 seconds. That is catastrophic. That's a 2-second loss that he has been scraping away for the last 25 or 30 minutes. So a lot left for Alex Sinkov to do now. Let's jump a little bit deeper in the field. Matt Gefeller in the number 19. Jeff Corral, Ruth Behera. This is a battle for 7th. That Ferrari coming forward in that green and black livery.
Yeah, look at that. So that's good to see some progress there from Behera. He's had a nice clean race, it would appear, to this point, and a nice battle at the moment with Corral and the McLaren just up the road. And looks like that is Gefeller just ahead of the McLaren in the Bentley. So all of these cars relatively close together here, fighting for positions. A couple on the same team, but Gefeller representing a different team. So there's that component to this as well.
Keeping an eye also on Burleson back in 11th on another charge. This is about the 3rd or 4th one today after having some issues. He's right on the tailpipes of Dean Benaviste now in the Ferrari. Big jump on the curb. Too much right in front of Burleson and some contact there. Burleson is struggling just to stay out of everyone's way tonight. It's been a real challenge. He just needs some clear racetrack, I think, just to clear his head after this one.
Oh, that's got to be so frustrating. Nothing he did wrong at all there, and all of a sudden you got a car sideways in front of you. You got to check up to try and miss. A little bit of contact might have done a bit more damage. It certainly held him up. And with time kind of running out here to try and run down Reeve for the 9th spot, just a strange and frustrating day for Burleson, who it seems to me has been on the receiving end of more of these than not.
Well, sometimes you're the bat, sometimes you're the ball, and today Burleson has been the ball. And with 8 minutes left, I'm sure he'd just like this night to be over so he can move on to our next round a little bit later in the season. That would be next month, July 14th at Spa, and get another run and try to do a little bit better next time. Meanwhile, out front, Josh Staffen has put another 3/10 on top of Alexinkov, and I almost wonder if Alexinkov knows that trying to drive back up to Staffen might cause more issues than it will solve. So maybe just waiting for Staffen to run into more traffic or make another mistake. But running down a driver from 3 seconds back with less than 8 minutes to go, Kevin, that's a real tall order for anybody.
Yeah, that's going to be really tough. I think Alexinkov is going to need some help from either lap traffic or Josh to make some mistakes. But we know Josh doesn't make many mistakes, so I think it's really going to come down to either lap traffic to make something happen here.
I don't think we have a ton of it either. There's Rodney Campbell back in 12th. Trying to get a read on where he is. He's on the backside of the racetrack. Josh Staffen is in a different area, so I don't think we're going to have at least a significant amount of lap traffic in the last 7 or 8 minutes of this race. Back to Corral and Behera. This is for 7th. And again, with Gefeller just up the road, this is one of those battles that could quickly accordion back together with a slight mistake. And Corral and Behera have been around each other all day long, but it seems like this Ferrari has been a little bit of everywhere in the middle of the pack today.
It has. It's been in the wars, which is fun. I imagine he's going to have a lot of memories and a lot of camaraderie at the end of this race, having raced against seemingly half of the field at one point or another, and right now embroiled in another really good duel with the McLaren just up ahead.
So England versus Italy right now, with the McLaren in 7th and the Ferrari back in 8th. And out front, it's the Japanese manufacturer Honda and Acura. Of course, the Honda NSX everywhere else other than the North American market, where it is branded as an Acura. And Staffen right now taking that car to near certain victory, but you don't ever like to call it till it's over, Ryan, because we all know how the commentator curse works. But maybe I'm just trying to throw Alexinkov a bone here.
It certainly sounds that way, but no. And not to be a bit pedantic here, but I think the Acura is also present in the Chinese market. But
okay.
Generally speaking, it is a Honda just about everywhere in the world, except for a couple select places. And so, as you can see, the Honda logo is on this particular car, but it's hard for me to break the habit of calling it an Acura, because that's what it's been for us racing in the States for all these years. And I know when I went over to Spa for the Total Energies, as it's now known, 24 Hours of Spa a couple of years ago, I was trying to figure out what I'm supposed to call this car, and I guess I had to conform to European nomenclature while I was over there, and then conversely, when some of our European friends have come to the States, they've had to try and adjust accordingly, and it's really been quite a struggle. But it does get us talking a lot about the Honda and or Acura, because it seems like every race we have to end up explaining this at one point or another. So maybe this was all part of the brilliant strategy all along.
For sure. I mean, trust me, the different branding of the same car is something I know very well, owning a Scion FRS, Toyota
Sure.
86, Subaru BRZ, whatever you want to call it. I think that car has 4 different names now. Now it's the Toyota 86 here in North America, not the GT 86. So it's, of course, now Acura probably being the higher luxury brand of Honda. I would say that's probably a better direction to go versus the Toyota Scion route. So I'll give them commendation for that one. But Josh is right now taking that car forward, but look at Alexinkov, rolled down 0.8 of a second, 2.2. If he could do that again and gain a full second a lap, which he almost did last time by, that would get him in a good position.
It's enough to make him think he can get there. What do you think, Kevin? I mean, do you keep pushing when you can see that you're making inroads here with 4 minutes left, or is it worth the risk at this stage when you've got a sure podium in the bag?
Yeah, I mean, I think you always push and you always hope that you can make it. And really, the only way to give up is to get to the checkered flag and run out of time. But the whole point is to try to make Josh have to push as well, because the harder you make the leader push, you might force him into a mistake.
So 3.5 minutes left. That is probably, given a lap time about a 1:35. Looks like we're just about 3 laps to go or thereabouts here this time through. So Staffan's only going to have to hold off Aleksenkov for 3 more times around here. And as they cross the line, Staffan's going to run a 1:36.021 to Aleksenkov's 1:36.036. So a slight loss that time by for the Ferrari, and that's not going to do you a whole lot of good. You got to make up ground, not lose it. So still a lot of work left to do if he wants to get there, and probably needs a little bit of luck alongside that.
Yep, but I think Kevin brings up a good point. There's always the chance that the leader is seeing that you're making inroads, and maybe that forces an error, spends too much time looking in the mirror, or just pushes a bit too hard, and that opens up the door. So it's got to be in the back of the mind of Aleksenkov, who has done a nice job all race long, running right in the tire tracks of our leader, Josh Staffen. Just hasn't quite been able to get close enough to try and make a move. It looked like we were building to one, and just a slight error was all it took, and he's not been able to recover from that since.
No, riding on board the helmet cam, you can see the hands moving very, very fast, and I think it was the art of racing in the rain that taught me that fast hands in the slow stuff and slow hands in the fast stuff, Kevin, if that's the right way to do it.
Yeah, that's definitely a good strategy, a good safe strategy, and in the end, the main focus is to always be smooth. You don't want to be kind of jerking the wheel around, but definitely you have the ability to move the steering wheel a lot more in the slow speed turns than you do the high speed. If you do that in the high speed, sometimes it's going to upset the car and make it really hard to drive.
Watching Aleksenkov on corner exit, you could see the wheel kind of jitter back and forth on throttle. Ryan, that tells me that he's taking it right to the edge of grip at corner exit, maybe turning that traction control down, trying to keep the car from holding itself back. And did it gain him some time? It did. 0.2 of a second that time through as we hit 1 minute and 21 seconds to go. No white flag notification, so I assume we'll get one more after this. And Aleksenkov would like a few more after this, but he's not going to get them.
No, he will not, but he's done a great job to rally back after dropping several seconds with the one little mistake that we chronicled. And I'll tell you, the second half of this race, this Ferrari has been the fastest car on the track. Staffen controlled the first 20 minutes, but there was a switch that was flipped at a certain point, and I don't know if that was Aleksenkov conserving or the car going away from Josh a little bit or some combination of a variety of factors, but that's the thing to take away if you're Aleksenkov, that you figured something out, and this car's a little bit better, at least here, over the long runs, and we'll see if that plays out over the course of the season.
30 seconds left to go in this race, and that's going to bring the white flag to us next time by for Josh Staffen. And meanwhile, there's another battle shaping up back here between Jeff Corral in 8th and the number 720, McLaren 720, and Hunter Reeve in the number 44, right behind, reeling him in. Last time by was a hair slower, but now within slipstream range, this could get very, very interesting. We'll keep our eye on both of these battles. Back for the lead and back for 8th. 1.6 seconds as he got big gain there for Aleksenkov. Now white flag one more time around. Oh, checkered that time. No white flag notification. We got the time actually ran out on that last lap, and I think Staffen lifted to make sure that he would get the checkered, Ryan. So
very clever.
That did the job, and Josh Staffen wins. CrowdStrike Cup Virtual Racing League round number 2. Roman Aleksenkov second, Bill Clark third place, Chris Locke fourth, Vadim Mola in 5th. I've always wondered why the checkered flag works that way. Usually you don't get a checkered until you've gotten the white, but that all happened at once there on that last lap.
Don't tell the folks up in Detroit that after a sports car race there in a different series this past weekend where there was no white flag displayed on a late race restart. Look at this drag race to the checkered flag.
I believe that's Jackson Roosin in the number 87. He is a lap down, but either way, drag race to the line. I'm sure they had some fun with that. Vadim Mola 5th. Matt Feller all the way back to 6th place. Rounding out his race, Arut Behera comes home in 7th, Jeff Corral 8th, Hunter Reeve 9th, and Dean Benaviste is going to finish the race out and finish the rest of the top 10. Here is a look at the race finishers here. And Ryan, Josh Staffen from flag to flag and picked up the CrowdStrike fastest lap award. Every second counts for Josh Staffen. And he had a second and a half to spare there at the end. He gets it done, picks up the fastest lap award, and beats Alex Sienkov and will extend his points lead.
Well, that's about a perfect evening for Josh Staffen. Pole, fastest lap, and the race win. Led every single lap. It's hard to find a fault in what Josh Staffen was able to do. Congratulations to him, and big points for him and his team as well. Well represented by him. And then look at that from Alex Sienkov, Clark, and Locke. It's a completely different team, well represented there inside the top 5.
Well, that's going to conclude our pro race. Don't go anywhere. We've got our AM race coming up here in just a minute. Kevin, we're going to let you go and at least as a viewer watch the rest of the night. But Kevin Bohm, the driver of the number 9 Honda Civic Type R TC. There's so many words and letters and combinations to the Type R. But Kevin, thanks for joining us tonight, and thanks for being with us. And I guess we'll see you next time at Spa.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
All right, so Kevin Bohm will head out for the night. We're going to head off to our next race. That's going to be the AM race. And now, Ryan, we're going to shift gears here a little bit to a slightly more casual race here to finish off the evening. 13 drivers queued up in this one. I always love watching these guys race, so I'm very, very excited.
It's been a ton of fun so far. We've seen some fireworks in the AM races, and look, it's a bit more laid back, at least in the build-up to the race, but when the green flag falls, what we've seen, Kyle, is no let-up whatsoever. That laid-back atmosphere that we talk about, yeah, maybe we see it for a little while, but there is still some very good competition. The races so far have been excellent, whether we're talking about the pro or the AM races.
Well, we are on a pace lap now. We're just got to reload some software here before we go green. But as we gear up for our second and final race of the evening, this is a slightly shorter race, and what that means is we are set up for a little bit more of a sprint round. And I always like that. The shorter you make a race, the less opportunity drivers have to get spread out, and that means a lot of excitement on tap here as we now head into our AM race. 25 minutes on the docket for this one here, Ryan. And here's a look at our runners: Trey Miller in the number 27, Joel Mattioli in the number 44, Pratik Mishra, who is leading the AM standings coming into the night, Jason Leach from Operation Motorsport, BZ in the number 22, Chris Ramirez, Kath McVeigh. Looks like we've got the 999 back with us, Jake Leeson, Chris Hayeswinkle, Ivan Lvov in the number 918, Webo in the number 18 car, and Kashan in the number 4 back in 13th. And also some damage to the number 4 car already, the 44 rather, has had a run-in in the pace lap here. So that's not a great start for him.
No, that is not what you want to see, and these cars are awfully close to one another, weaving back and forth on this pace lap, and I wonder if that has anything to do with it. But with the way the damage is modeled within ACC, I suspect that is going to hurt the car, certainly in a straight line. It should add to the drag. It should change the center of pressure a little bit aerodynamically as well. But I suppose if there's a track to have this issue on, this would be the one, because you don't need the straight line speed to be fast necessarily, although I wouldn't encourage having to race with the kind of damage we're seeing on that 44 car.
Well, I like the liveries on the 27 and the 44. These are, of course, inspired by the Mercedes-AMG Formula One team that CrowdStrike also partners with, of course, Lewis Hamilton and the Mercedes team, and based off of Lewis Hamilton and Valtteri Bottas's cars, looking very, very sharp as we work through the last couple corners here. And I think this is, if I'm correct about this, I think that's based off the previous year's livery with the Mercedes tri-point design on the side that ended up turning into an AMG fading design for the 2021 season. But nicely inspired liveries in all black. Number 23, that's BEZ behind Bez in the 23, or the 20. That's Jason Leach in the 23. That's the all-black car. All right, as we come up onto the front straightaway, 25 minutes for our AM race here for CrowdStrike Cup Virtual Racing League round number 2. The green flag happens right now. Green flag flies, we're racing. In the CrowdStrike Cup Virtual Racing League, big move by the Porsche, darting out of line. I think that's Hayeswinkle in the number 9. Up the middle, look at that 3 wide. Big bobble there as we head down to the first corner.
Oh, that was an aggressive move, and the aggression continues into turn 1. How about 2 positions in 1? Did a hip check. That gives a couple more positions to Hayeswinkle. Oh, and a big punt as well. my goodness, as clean as the start in the pro race was, this has not been good. And Mattioli off track from the outside of the front row. Oh, the carnage just continues.
This track is so narrow. That's Bez in the number 22 that got turned around backwards. He's going to be the cork in the bottle here as everyone has to stomp on the brakes to miss it. And Mattioli returns to pit lane as we wait for the pack to shuffle itself back out and reorganize. But for now, I think it's not Kashan out front. So we're doing a little bit of a shuffle here. It should be. Is it Mishra that's out front? Not quite. It's the 27. Oh, there goes the Mishra machine. He is the driver leading the championship. He loops it in the number 7. He's going to tumble down the order now, backs up onto the racetrack. That's going to be 3, 4, maybe 5 spots that he's going to lose.
Oh, and a lot of track position, a little bit of a spin there trying to rejoin. Not a lot of traction to be found in the grass. That basically drops Mishra back to the back of the running order. Looks like Mattioli's had to go to the pit lane with the damage that we saw, and then an issue subsequent to that at the start. So looks like Miller has cycled through all of this to the lead, but as he does so, drops a wheel, sneaking through his Hayeswinkle, who has been on a remarkable charge, able to get to the front and will lead the lap.
He started all the way towards the back of the field, and in one lap he drives through everybody and goes to the point. Hayeswinkle, an amazing drive. Jason Leach from Operation Motorsport comes across the line in second, and it's Keith McVeigh who comes across the line in third. He runs a little wide, Leach a little bit tight around the curb. You see the dust flying up there. Good battle for P2 forming up here, but Hayeswinkle trying to drive away, 2.6 second lead.
I would love to just watch the entire first lap from Hayeswinkle's onboard. What craziness must have taken place in front of him. I mean, that was an unbelievable drive to get to the front. Some of it was luck, no question about it, able to avoid a couple of spinning cars, but very aggressive on the start, made some nice decisive moves. And look at that, now has a nice solid lead over Leach in this matte black car. The McLaren running in second, McVeigh third, and carnage behind as Mishra continues to struggle, and a couple other cars caught up in this as well.
That's Webo Chen in the number 18 that got a piece of that in the Nissan GTR. And I think Pratik Mishra, in the Ferrari, he's going to be off track. This is devastating for the points championship. Or Mishra, I don't believe actually was he leading? Let's have a look at the AM. Yes, it was leading, and it had the fastest lap award from last week, so none of those things are going to happen this week. That is not the way that he wanted to start this round. But going back to Hayeswinkle, as Richard Petty says, Ryan, sometimes you'd rather be lucky than good, and I think Hayeswinkle is both, at least so far.
So far, so good. And looking at the way that this car is handling, we've talked about this before, maybe in the AM race especially, where it's a bit more relaxed and maybe there's less investment into it. This looks like a driver that is racing with a keyboard or with a controller, something where the inputs are going to be more on-off rather than on a scale. I mean, just look at that steering wheel, how it's snapping back and forth. So whatever it is that Chris is using, he's remarkably adept at it. I can't believe some of these guys that we've seen using something other than a high-tech sim racing wheel and how fast they can be, but clearly very, very strong, although it's now Leach who's really been putting in some good solid laps. He's been able to close in on Hayeswinkle here over the last few sectors of this track.
Jason Leach again from Operation Motorsport. Operation Motorsport actually has an iRacing series as well, and Leach goes for a ride through the gravel trap. We've talked to Jason at Indianapolis last year. We had him on the live stream for the CrowdStrike Racing event at the Indianapolis 8-hour, but of course with Operation Motorsport having their iRacing event as well, that runs on with Pit Stop TV with my buddy Andrew Cardinale. So they've got sim racing not only in Assetto Corsa but also on the iRacing side of things, and of course Operation Motorsport pairing up with DXDT Racing and Kevin Bohm, and we didn't talk about it this time because we talk about it usually every time we chat with Kevin, but they basically bring veterans in to help as a non-profit to help out in race teams and other opportunities, which is a really cool initiative. There's a handful of them that help out, and they've helped Kevin Bohm reach success in TC America, so a really cool story there. As we see Keith McVeigh behind, this is a new name I don't really remember from last time, running up here in third, and a brief look at the championship standings tells me that, he was there, but just didn't have any points from the first round. Currently 19th and clobbers Jason Leach in turn one and goes the long way around, just missed the breaking point there. and Leach will recover, and they will both remain where they were.
Wow, that was some wild stuff there, and Hazewinkle clearly benefits from this. He's been able to build his lead as a consequence, although he's got cars off track to try and avoid as well. That is the 4 car of Kishan off track, trying to rejoin but struggling to do so. But yeah, Hazewinkle definitely benefits from that little coming together from Leach and McVeigh. That's let his lead grow from under 2 seconds to nearly 4 at last check.
I'm sure he's liking this, watching the mirror get messy, seeing the dust fly up there, and watching Kashan off the racetrack. Sometimes, Ryan, you go off the track and it's easy to get back on. You just drive back on course. Other times, you get yourself stuck in a gravel trap or on a curb or beat yourself on the grass. It can be difficult to get yourself unstuck sometimes.
No question about that. Certainly in the real world, I find gravel traps are more simple to escape in the virtual world. Although, come to think of it, I don't think I've ever found myself in a gravel trap. In real life, that is. There's a few times I wish I had because I hit something much harder. But, and that's kind of what the gravel trap is there for, to try and slow a car down before it hits something hard. But I don't think I've ever managed to get beached before. And I'm kind of surprised by that, come to think of it.
There's been a big push. Whoa!
Whoa!
Another big hit there from McVeigh on Jason Leach. There's been a big push lately to remove a lot of gravel traps from racetracks because they also have the tendency to send cars tumbling if you drive into them sideways. So a lot of tracks have been removing them. Watkins Glen is one that, there's one car that goes way off track there in turn 1. More contact here between second and third. But going back to the gravel traps, Watkins Glen has removed a whole bunch of them and replaced them with pavement runoff because it's almost as effective as gravel is slowing a car down. It just gives you an opportunity to get back rolling again. But I know at least in Watkins Glen's case, they weren't able to completely pave them over because of local runoff restrictions and regulations for water, controlling groundwater. I know in other places it isn't so much of an issue. Road America still has a lot of theirs, and they find them to be relatively useful. But there's a lot of ways to control cars off the racetrack, a lot of different wall types, a lot of different verge methods. You've got places like Silverstone use a lot of the turf to keep drivers on the racetrack. But I've always found it interesting where tracks leave gravel traps and where they put them, where they find them useful, because it's sort of a science to design racetracks like they do.
Oh, for sure, and I think increasingly that's the approach. It is a very scientific approach, and to be honest with you, some of the reason I think I like an old school track like Zandvoort here is because it's less scientific and it's more just, this is what we've done, we have our reasons, and we're following the natural topography. I think there's some charm to that, and it leads to some good racetracks. Not to say that there can't be a good modern racetrack. There certainly are a few that are well regarded, but in general, I think drivers kind of yearn for the old school, a place like this, and a place that punishes you for a mistake, like VIR, where SRO America was at this most recent race weekend just a couple weeks ago.
And I think a lot of drivers will look to street circuits as sort of a real classic way of racing that hasn't really changed all that much. Places like Detroit, Belle Isle, Long Beach, even places, whoa, big slide there. Tracks like Monaco, for example, that haven't really changed all that much. It's a real classic way to race. If you make a mistake, you're going to hit something. And from a spectator's perspective, you don't want your favorite driver to be out of the race, but from a driving perspective, you like that because you think you're the best and you think everyone else is going to make a mistake and not you. And unfortunately, it doesn't always work out that way, but it's still a real cool form of racetrack that there's not enough of, I think, still left in the world.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I think that is the charm of street racing. It really does punish you, and it also rewards you for being brave and being able to pull it off. And we see that on street courses. And it is interesting you mentioned that it hasn't changed a whole lot, and I do agree with that notion, although from what I heard, I was in Detroit this past weekend covering IndyCar, and I heard a little bit of scuttlebutt that there could be for the street race at Nashville, which will include SRO America as well as IndyCar and a couple other championships. There could be some new temporary wall technology making its debut, and I didn't get a full explanation on what exactly this is, but something to keep an eye on if that's of interest to you, and I think it would be to you, Kyle. I know you like your curbs.
I'm a big curb fan.
I suspect you like walls also,
Yes.
and the different types of walls, Armco versus concrete versus the safer barrier. Well, whatever the case may be, I think we could get something new at Nashville, so that'll be a storyline to keep an eye on when we get there in a couple months.
That is sort of intriguing. I know that there's, like at places like Circuit of the Americas and, the FIA Grade 1 circuits have plastic barriers, the Tech Pro,
Right.
they call that. Of course, you mentioned the Armco, the safer barrier, the tire barrier, all sorts of ways to keep cars contained on the racing surface. That really is intriguing. I'm trying to figure out what the engineers thought is better than any of those, which that excites me because we like keeping drivers safe and fans outside of the danger zone as well. So that's really interesting and great to hear.
Well, it also could be that I misheard, so don't
I know you
don't
got me all
quote me on
excited.
that. But that is something I remember hearing over the weekend and thinking, well, that sounds interesting. Let's try and get some more information on that.
Certainly does sound interesting. Meanwhile, Hayes Winkle out front by 7.5 seconds. Jason Leach second place. Chris Ramirez in third. Trey Miller, the pole sitter, back in fourth. 17 seconds back from third. Lvov in fifth in the number 918. Big slide for Jason Leach. He held on to that quite nicely. And these mid-engine cars like this McLaren 720S, from what I understand, Ryan, mid-engine cars have a tendency to be really tricky to hang on to when you get them sideways. I know that the second-gen Toyota MR2 was especially known for having kind of snap oversteer. Now, modern GT3 cars are not quite that tipsy, but I know that a front-engine rear-drive car generally has dynamics that are pretty savable, and that mid-engine cars can kind of spin like a top if you get them turned around the wrong way.
Yeah, and you also hear a lot about Porsches being difficult in that way where they can kind of swing around like a pendulum. That's, of course, the rear engine configuration, at least in the GT3 version of the 911. And like they were looking at right here, for instance, and that it's kind of an acquired skill, and I think that's why you end up with people who get a reputation for being Porsche specialists. And that's probably true to some degree of the mid-engine cars as well. But to be honest, there must be an advantage to the mid-engine configuration because so many brands are going to that. Even Porsche, right, with the venerable 911. If you're talking about its GTE spec car, GTE gives you a bit more freedom to make modifications away from the road-going version that GT3 does not. And they did swap the position of the gearbox and the engine in the GTE spec 911, and for Porsche to depart from what is just so much at the heart of what defines a 911, I think that speaks to the advantage that that manufacturers find in going to the mid-engine layout. So even the Chevy Corvette going from front engine to mid engine with the C8 is another example of it. And so many of these GT3 cars are, but they aren't all, which is one of the reasons we love sports car racing. And there's a lot of things that maybe aren't super palatable about balance of performance. It gets fans griping a little bit, but one thing, oh boy.
Whoa. Oh man, that's our first and second place drivers. Hayes Winkle and Leach collected there by one of the drivers. I couldn't see who that was. But
Well, that was one of the two Mercedes. I think that was Mattioli, who has come back from the pits that we saw make contact there.
it was.
And Hayes Winkle had apparently been involved earlier, and that let Leach get closer, and then Leach got clobbered and hasn't been able to move since.
Yeah, that car is going to be a little worse for wear, unfortunately. He's going to reverse it off course, but that's going to be the end of Jason Leach's victory charge, unfortunately. But going back to this mid-engine platform as he peels it off the pavement there, and oh man, that car is looking rough. But the mid-engine platform, why did so many manufacturers go there? Well, probably because of the weight distribution and how you can get them pretty much essentially 50-50 weight with larger engines. Now, some lighter weight cars like the Mazda Miata, the Toyota 86, those cars can achieve a near 50-50 weight distribution because they have tiny little motors out front. But when you have a big turbo V8 that might weigh a whole lot of kilograms, you got to put it pretty central to keep that weight distribution perfect. And that seems like these manufacturers have sorted out how to do that very, very effectively. It also allows you to play with the aerodynamics because you can get the nose very, very low. But it's really interesting that the engineers have sort of figured this out. And it's also very weird that the Porsche can be as good as it is with engineering-wise, seems like a bad idea to put the engine behind the rear axle, but the 911 GT3R is a very tried and true platform, and it continues to win races internationally and domestically. So it's a great car, as are all the cars here in GT3 racing and SRO, and a lot of diversity, a lot of different sounds from the different engine platforms as well, which is great to see. See some penalties here. Ramirez a stop and go for 30 seconds. McVeigh drive through. So some penalties being assessed here for some of the contact earlier in the race.
Well, there was a lot of contact earlier in this race. That was a crazy couple of laps at the start, and it's calmed down a little bit since then, but Hazewinkel has, well, first of all, the first lap from Hazewinkel was amazing, just coming from 7th or 8th or 9th, something like that at the start, to ultimately get up to the lead, and every time it looks like maybe someone's been closing down on him, something has gone wrong for the chasing car, and his lead just keeps on growing. So now it's 1.7 seconds over Miller. Then Lvov is now up into 3rd. Gleason and Mitten the top 5. But it's not over yet, because we've got a lot of lap traffic to deal with, some cars with some damage that maybe aren't driving all that straight at the moment. There's still a lot to try and negotiate here in the final 8.5 minutes, but I think that Porsche might be about the only car that doesn't have too much damage on it. At least that's the way it looks to me.
Yeah, let's have a run through our field here and have a look at some of the cars that might be clean or otherwise have some damage. There's Hazewinkel. That car has all the fenders still on. That's good to see. Trey Miller, we've documented, had some damage to the nose of that number 27 Mercedes that he got early in the day. Lvov, as we mentioned. How about this Aston Martin Vantage V8? That car's looking real solid. Not a scratch on, well, maybe a scratch or two, or a scuff at least on the side, but back in 3rd. Jay Gleason, a ton of damage on this car, but he's still trucking along in 4th. Minton in the Ferrari has had a very interesting day, but that car, for better or for worse, is still in one piece, but probably needs a new paint job.
It's looking that way. It's been through the wars, no question about it, but the Ferrari, nice and strong here so far. As we say that.
At least it was you this time.
Commentator's curse strikes again.
Well, Jason Leach has his car repaired, which is nice to see. So hopefully he can get some of the spots back that he lost with that contact a little earlier in the day. And Keith McVeigh in the number 12 car, there's a look at his car. So he's already been repaired as well. So a handful of drivers have been down pit lane, gotten their cars fixed up to go to the end of the race, which is a lot more enjoyable than driving around a car that's dragging bodywork everywhere. That's not very fun.
No, it's not, and usually it affects how the car is driving, and the wheels might not be pointed straight, or maybe just the speed isn't there, whatever the case. It's not ideal, no doubt about that. And Hazewinkel just keeps trucking along. It's remarkable, and again, doing this with some kind of controller that doesn't appear to be a steering wheel, just based on the inputs that we're seeing. Saw a car go through there, but that was not for position, or was it? I think it might have been.
It was. Trey Miller did sneak by there.
Wow.
Under our radar
come
there.
From?
He was hauling. Last time by was a full 10 seconds quicker than Hazewinkel. Miller got involved in an early collision and has been a lot faster. Well, not overall. Hazewinkel does still have a faster lap log than Miller, but Miller last time by was going a lot quicker and got the pass done.
Wow, I thought that was Mattioli unlapping himself, but no, that is Miller coming through to take the lead and really coming out of nowhere. That is remarkable, because that was a lead of nearly, what was it, 15, 20 seconds, wasn't it?
It was. It was a pretty sizable gap, and Hazewinkel is now off in the gravel, so this is unraveling very, very quickly for the driver of the number 9 Porsche. And Miller only has about 5 minutes left to go. That's about 3 or 4 laps left for Miller, and he's not looking back either.
No, he is not. Great stuff. Good recovery there from Miller, who had a good qualifying effort to start towards the front and wasn't able to escape some of that carnage, but has since recovered and done so in a big way.
Here's some downshifting on the other side of the racetrack. Let's check back in with Pratik Mishra again, who was our points leader coming into the night. And big dive up the inside of the 3rd place car and makes it through. That's not for position. He's about a lap or a few behind. And again, Mishra came into the night with 39 points over Chris Ramirez. Now Ramirez is 1 position ahead of Mishra, so that's going to be the saving grace. Although Jay Gleason, who was 3rd coming into the night with 25 points, is now running 4th. So there could be some shuffling in the standings here towards the end of the night.
And don't forget, Ramirez does owe a penalty still, and that has not yet been served. And if it's not by the end, I think it gets converted into a time penalty. So one way or the other, he will be dropping some positions here. So that should give Mishra a bit of a reprieve, at least as far as the points battle is concerned.
There is I think that's Jason Leach creeping in behind. Yes, it is. It looks like the 999 that was between these two cars has been lost somewhere along the racetrack. And now it's a battle for fourth between Gleason in the 64 and Jason Leach in the 23, unless he's a lap behind, which he might be. As we watch this battle for at least track position. 3.8 seconds is the gap between Miller and Hayeswinkle with 4 minutes to go. And Miller has not, as I mentioned before, he has not looked back since he took the lead away. And who has the fastest lap so far? It's not Hayeswinkle, it's actually Jason Leach from what, oh no, actually not even that. Mishra again, a 1:39.228. He ran that after he came out of the pits, so Mishra is going to pick up 3 bonus points for the CrowdStrike fastest lap as long as no one runs faster in the closing moments.
Well, that does help to salvage something from a points perspective out of what has been admittedly a fairly disappointing evening, I think, for Pratik, who's been very quick, as we've seen, certainly has a car capable of running at the front based on that lap time right there alone, but just hasn't had a whole lot of luck, and that car's pretty banged up, which tells pretty much all the tale of his race evening, unfortunately. So back in 9th, but with that CrowdStrike fastest lap comes 3 bonus points, and that's going to be important with the championship in mind. It looks like Kishan with an issue there off track.
Yeah, saw the yellow flag waving and looked up the road and saw the blue car off against the Armco. Looked out as Jason Leach squeezes on through, trying to make his way back up inside the top 5. Where is Trey Miller? Keep an eye on where he is, because we're down to the final 3 minutes. Which means that next time by, we should hit the white flag. Or next time after that. We didn't get a white flag previously, so I'm afraid to not say it. I'm going to keep an eye on the lap times this time, at least a little bit better.
I think you were right, though, in our pro race that Josh manipulated it, and I don't mean that in a pejorative sense. I think he was very clever in how he handled that to make sure that time ran out and there wasn't an extra opportunity for Alexinkov to try and make a move. So not sure if we're going to be close enough to the threshold where that's something Miller can do.
No, I don't think so. Yeah, this will be 2 to go this time through. Now, the reason why I was confused so much earlier is that I guess I didn't fully understand the way that Assetto Corsa Competizione logs that final lap. How it should work is the lap that you hit 0 minutes, 0 seconds remaining, that is going to be your white flag. But usually that is calculated as you come to the white flag. So you're not going to run a slow lap on, a lap that was supposed to be 2 to go, run a slow lap and then get the checkered. That's not how it's supposed to work. The checkered is always supposed to follow a white. The problem is if the time expires before you get back to the stripe, right, you can't have that extra lap because the time's out. So that, I guess I don't fully understand why it did that, but if that's how the logic works, then that's how it works, and that is something that can be used to your advantage. Obviously, Josh Staffen knew it worked like that because he slowed up a lot to make sure that he would get those extra seconds ticked off the clock. Meanwhile, Trey Miller is going to pick up the white flag next time by, as long as he doesn't take extra long to get there. It's a minute to get back to the stripe before that checkered would come out, and I think he's going to get there.
And he can't hold up too much because Hayeswinkle's only 4 seconds back, so that kind of limits his options. But that said, I don't think he'll mind an extra lap. Could be famous last words, we'll see. But it's been a nice, smooth cruise ever since taking the lead. I just want to know how he did it. Where did he come from? Because Hayeswinkle had the race in hand, it would have appeared. And even still, since losing the lead, he dropped 4 seconds back and really hasn't lost a whole lot since then.
I think so when we saw him lose the lead, I think he had been about 10 seconds off the pace. So he had a really slow lap, an unusually slow lap, and that's what let Trey Miller get on by. But since then, they've been pretty much on the same exact pace. Yeah,
you might be right. But nevertheless, Miller has done what he's needed to do, a little bit of damage at the front of that Mercedes, but even still, it's a fast machine. It's going to be fast enough, it would appear, to take him to a win in the second AM race of the season.
Yeah, white flag is out. This time we'll get one as Trey Miller works his way through the middle sector in that number 27, again inspired by the Mercedes AMG, or the Petronas Formula One team. Again, with CrowdStrike sponsoring that team, and I think they've moved up from the CrowdStrike logo at one point was on the tail of the car. Now it's moved up to the halo on the nose of the car, which is really, really cool, and it's always in view, which is nice to see. But Miller with that very famous sort of black and silver with the kind of teal stripe, the teal swoosh going through it, working his way through the last lap. Chris Hayeswinkle in a Porsche livery with some SRO partners, Total on the nose, got some Pirelli logos on there as well. Fanatec on the windshield. Of course, that's a new partnership globally this year as well, Ryan, with the Fanatec GT World Challenge, as Hayeswinkle goes off in the chicane and rolls to a stop. Back on to avoid the penalty, I believe, but he should be able to hang on to that pretty well. Out front, Trey Miller through the final corner in the AM race here in the CrowdStrike Cup Virtual Racing League. From a spin to win, he gets it done at Zandvoort.
Very Danny Sullivan-esque with the spin and win. Great work by Trey Miller to recover and survive some of the chaos. There was no shortage of it here at Zandvoort. And Hayeswinkle, you got to wonder what might have been, although does have that off at the end, and at this point I guess he's done. So into the tire wall. Luckily you don't have to pay for repairs on your virtual car.
It looks like the 918 car comes home in third. The pearl white Aston Martin brings it home. Lvov in the 918. Jay Gleason in the number 64 car will bring it home in fourth. Jason Leach has already taken the checkered. He was a lap down, so that's going to do it. Here is a look at your finishing order for tonight's round number 2 of the 2021 CrowdStrike Cup Virtual Racing League AM race. And have a look at the teams there. The red with Gleason and Leach with Operation Motorsport SRO down the order there just a little bit. Meanwhile, the 27 and 9 teammates up in first and second. A good run for them. AWS team with Lvov in third in the 918. Decent run for them here as well. But final thoughts here, Ryan, as we conclude our second round. Our third will be in about a month, July 14th at Spa-Francorchamps. That's a real fun one. A lot bigger racetrack, a lot more open space, but just as risky in a lot of areas as well.
Yeah, that's true. It's only a few hundred miles away geographically as well from Zandvoort in the Netherlands, but don't have to worry about that, of course, racing virtually. Nevertheless, yeah, fun night of racing once again. Saw great competition at the front, especially in the pro race. A little bit chaotic in the AM race, but a deserving winner nevertheless in both of our events tonight. Glad to be a part of it. Thanks to everybody from CrowdStrike for having me, and can't wait to see what next month brings.
Well, lots more racing to happen this season, not only for the CrowdStrike Cup Virtual Racing League, but as well as the GT World Challenge America esports competitions that will be continuing to happen. We've got another round next weekend, so make sure that you tune into the GT World channel for that. And a big thanks again to CrowdStrike, CrowdStrike Racing, AWS, Operation Motorsport, Danielle and Robbie behind the scenes making this all happen. And we'll see you next time on July 14th for round number 3 from Spa. I'm Kyle Hire with Ryan Marine. We'll see you next time.